Hello. Alright, I got tons of replies about animal rights. So, if you ever spend much time around dogs and cats, it's evident that they're both. By both, he means conscious and capable of suffering. So, the answer is obvious. I'm going to ignore your question asking for references to literature and evidence and just say, obviously, if you spent time around cats, you would know. Because scientific observation isn't needed, we just need our intuition or something. Um, it's super irrelevant, but I have spent time around dogs and cats, yes. Like more than the average person. Okay, so. And he linked to this. Brain scans show that dogs are as conscious as human children. Um, so these kind of articles don't understand the hardware independence of software, of computation. They don't understand that you can't figure out what's going on in software by looking at the hardware. What they're doing is equivalent of CPU scans that look at heat and electrical current in regions of CPUs in a like Mac or PC. And then they say CPU heat scans so that Macs are twice as conscious as PCs or something because they have more heat generated. Or I mean, for literally the same evidence, you could say Macs are twice as inefficient as PCs. Like, just assume that they're doing an equal amount and then say they generate more heat. By the way, it's completely made up. I have no idea. Uh, well, on general knowledge, I would say Apple puts significant effort into low energy computing and making things heat efficient. They like to put fewer fans in their computers. So I'd expect Mac, and they have like, I'll show you. In Activity Monitor, they added this energy tab years ago, and they do energy monitoring. So I would have a significant expectation of Mac OS and Mac hardware being more energy efficient. So the example is kind of backwards. Apple cares so much, not because of environmentalism, which is a factor, but because of battery life for their devices that run on batteries, which is most of them. So saving energy is a big deal so that they can advertise longer battery life on their laptops and stuff. And people actually use that. It makes a difference. Anyways, yes, on general principles, um, if the hardware is a universal computer, then you're to some extent done analyzing the hardware. Like, it could at this point be running any computation. It simply depends on the software. Now, there's a few ways you could still analyze it and get some sort of more than zero information, but and especially if you know something about both the hardware and the software, then you can get some side channel information by measuring heat or something. But yeah, to a reasonable approximation, you just have to figure out it's a universal computer, and then you're done analyzing the hardware, and you should start considering how the software works. So this whole thing is like barking up the wrong tree, to use a dog metaphor. Inescapable conclusion: dogs are people too. Not dogs deserve moral respect, deserve liberation, deserve rights, deserve welfare. None of those conclusions. They're people too. Dogs equal human beings. So not very scientific-y. Anyways, what's their argument? We have so there's a brain region, in other words, a hardware region. So they're trying to understand software via hardware regions, even though it is a universal computer. It's very hard to learn much from hardware regions in general. Like with our CPUs, we have things like an integer math unit on the CPU and a floating point math unit. And I don't know about all designs, but in some designs at least, those are separate. So it would be possible to measure current and say, okay, the computer's doing some integer math. And now the computer's doing some floating point math, although it's frequently just going to be both at once, so it'll be really hard to tell anything. A better way to try to learn something by measuring hardware would be you could look at how much is the CPU doing versus the GPU. So you could see like high load on both, low load on both, or high load on one and low load on the other, which might help you guess when the computer is rendering 3D games or using the GPU for encoding H.265 video faster or something like that. Anyways, yeah, they're seriously like people who just measure heat in PCs and then try to say that they know what's going on in the software layer. Like, think about how hard it is to tell if someone's playing a game or using a web browser based on measuring heat in the computer. Are they looking at photos? What type of photos are they looking at? Are they looking at dog photos that are happy, or are they looking at, like, pictures of people crying that are sad? Are you going to be able to tell that by measuring heat and current in the CPU? No. If you were like a super advanced alien, and you could measure like atom by atom exactly what was going on, you might be able to figure it out from the hardware, because the hardware and the software are, as a matter of physics, connected. But we're nowhere near that precise, know what we're doing that much, etc. That kind of thing would be the same as someone who's like, I can do brain surgery and replace you with a different person. Like, you could do brain surgery on me and be like, I'm just going to edit your brain until you're David Deutsch, and you're exactly like him. Something like that. It's theoretically possible, because if you manipulate the physical atoms correctly, and maybe do a few electrical currents or whatever, you can replace all the information that makes me me with all the information that makes him him, if you could measure what he is. And then, use like nanobots to do surgery or something. Anyways, if you're at like that level of technology, you could maybe get somewhere by measuring the hardware. I mean, the same way that they would have the technology to brain scan David Deutsch and then get everything about him into a computer. So they'd be able to run simulations of him in their computer that were accurate, and then they could use that to help guide their surgery where they turn me into him. Anyways, we're not anywhere resembling that technology level. It's not close. So yes, the whole premise of what they're doing is just silly and ignorant, which is why I kept trying to ask for literature from people who know some computer science instead of ignoring it. Like, these articles like this do not say anything about computer science theory and hardware independence and universality and Turing. Okay. Done with that article. Well, if animals can't suffer, then we can, eat them? This is fucking ridiculous. He's like, even if I completely conceded, I'd still be a vegan because of other reasons that have nothing to do with animal welfare. So it totally doesn't even matter if you're right that there's no such thing as animal welfare. Like, that's not intellectually honest. It's not curious about the state of the world. It's not curious about what animals are. It's an irrelevant question to veganism. Like, what the fuck? Like, Peter Singer and so on do not think it is an irrelevant question whether animals suffer. They think it's a crucial core question as one of the main motivations. It's fucking absurd to say it's an irrelevant question. Very dishonest. I should stop talking to this guy. I should not talk to him further. VD-RAR. Wait, it's this guy again. This is a short answer, then it's a reasonable question. Wait, temporarily anesthetic. Why not just say people who are asleep? That's a red herring. I'm not gonna respond to that. Should people lose their rights when they're temporarily unconscious? That's such a off-topic issue. I've heard that one before, but I don't think it's very interesting. Because you can deal with it just by saying, just like with law and order and contracts and stuff, like, I can contract with people, or we can set up laws so that they're not allowed to kill me while I'm asleep. Like, I can make deals with people about the future. I won't kill you in your sleep, and you won't kill me in our sleep, or whatever, It's not hard to deal with. There's a moral agent, me right now, that cares whether I'm killed in my sleep or not, because I have a future after I'm asleep. Alright, let's see what this guy says. Chris Insert Coin. I don't think I talked with him yet. First of all, I don't know what moral rights are supposed to be. Alright, well, this seems like not steel manning and just getting distracted by tangents. Okay, sure. The right to live in freedom and harm. Yes, this is what I'm talking about. Okay, no problem. Moving on. What do these rights have to do with general intelligence? I think they all are. But okay, what does he think rights are based on then? They do have general intelligence. The idea that general intelligence might have major moral relevance is something all reasonable people should agree on. I'm gonna stick with that. I think this guy's just unreasonable. Like, dismissing intelligence as maybe a key factor in the importance of creatures is unreasonable. Like, just offhand, out of hand, being like, no, it's self-evident intelligence doesn't matter. It's got to be something else. Like, that's ridiculous. Intelligence is a major trait. Okay, and then what does he mean by sentience? Okay, me. Physics can explain and account for everything that exists. Him. I don't think so. Right, so magic. Science is not the be-all, end-all. Alright, I'm not going to get into his hatred of science. Holy shit, I got some actual upvotes. I was, my karma for a long time was 1639 because I rarely post new discussions, and comment karma doesn't affect that number. And then when I posted about the animal rights stuff, it went down to 1638, no big deal. But now it is actually up, so I've gotten 3 upvotes since then, apparently. Which is, it's very few either way, but it's like not hate. Like, I wouldn't have been surprised if I just got like 20 downvotes. Karma's not very important, it just tells you a little bit about people's reactions. Also, when you go negative, Reddit throttles you and only lets you write a comment every 10 minutes. Or something like that. Which is actually really ruins discussions. Like, if they downvote you too much, you basically can't reply very much anymore. So that's a problem. But mostly I'm just surprised that they were a bit less hateful than I expected. And, because, okay, so a lot of subreddits, this is very common. They're very, very downvote happy and they don't really give arguments. Like, they don't want to explain why they hate stuff, they just mass downvote. If you go on a subreddit like, am I the asshole? People post scenarios and they say like, am I the asshole for doing this, or is the other guy the asshole in this scenario? And then people will give responses, and a lot of the times what happens is one side, like you're the asshole, gets massively upvoted, and the other side, you're not the asshole, gets massively downvoted. So all the responses anywhere near the top are all on the same side. And there's very little engagement with actual arguments where they say why the other side is wrong. They just say their side and get upvotes, and the other side says their position and gets downvotes. And there's no engagement. So what's happened on the vegan subreddit is actually better than that. There hasn't been very much voting one way or another. And instead of that, there have been people actually responding with words, with saying things, with comments, which I think is a lot better than upvotes and downvotes. So they've given some reasoning, they've asked some questions, etc. And the quality is less than I would like, but it's not egregiously bad compared to other internet forums or anything. So I'm glad that they're not just downvoting into oblivion. Yes, Reddit absolutely promotes. So they organize threads with high voted stuff on top. See, this is 6 points, so it's on top. And then this one is 3 points, so it's lower down. And then this one is score hidden. I think that means it's too new, so they don't tell you, but it has fewer points. And then this one down here is fewer points. So they, in large threads, people basically only see this stuff with a bunch of upvotes. And then there's a generic Reddit thing where low karma can cause you to only be able to post one post every 10 minutes in comments. And yeah, some subs have specific policies where they punish you for low karma. You see the same thing on Stack exchanges where you get certain privileges for having enough upvotes, and you see it on Less Wrong, which is like based on Reddit or something, if I remember right, or based on Stack Exchange. I don't know, but it has a lot of the same stuff. There was actually okay, so the first time I went to Less Wrong, this is like 8 years ago maybe, and I had a big discussion about Popper, and Eliza Yukowski personally said something like, you're getting more downvotes than I've ever seen before, and you still didn't shut the fuck up, so I'm going to use admin powers to help censor you extra. The second half of that, not his words, but that was very precisely what he said and meant. That's the actual message. He's like, basically, the downvotes didn't suppress you. They didn't burn the heretic adequately, so he added extra stuff. He's just like, oh, downvotes aren't working, so I'm going to hide all of your threads from the front page so no one finds them. That was his response, rather than, debating the issues and responding about Popper. So, not only are there the written rules of what happens when you get downvotes on these forums, there are also the unwritten rules where moderators just step in and say, well, you got a lot of downvotes, so clearly you're not welcome here, I'm just going to start censoring you or whatever. So that kind of thing is common. They use a lot of social pressure and certain limited privileges and so on. and put the high scoring things on top, etc. But then on top of that, if that doesn't work to get the discussion to be the way they want, they just take additional ad hoc measures. Hacker News, by the way, is particularly bad because, so on Reddit, I think some stuff gets auto-collapsed, so you have to like click to see it. But on Hacker News, if your comment gets downvoted like 4 times, like it only takes a couple downvotes. It's changed to a light gray text that's very, very hard to read. You have to like copy paste it into a different program in order to read it, or like squint at your monitor like really hard. They do this on purpose. There's no like button to click to make the text readable. There's just no decent way to read it on purpose. So yes, they have major elements of popularity contest. They also have major short time horizon elements. Like topics just fall off the front page after a day or two and then no one notices them anymore. Or after a few hours on more popular subs, unless they get a ton of upvotes. And how long they stay on the front page is based on the amount of upvotes. There are a lot of subs where if no one will upvote your thing from the new section, then it never gets to the front page and no one notices it and you get no responses, basically. If we click on new, this is a small enough subreddit, it doesn't make as much difference. See, okay, my post from yesterday is the 3rd post on the new list. Like they get very few posts here. But at bigger subreddits, your posts just scroll down the new list, and once they're off the front page of the new list, if they're not in the 50 most recent new posts, which might be fewer on other subreddits, I'm not sure. Once it gets past that, basically no one's going to see it. No one's going to go to the new page, scroll through 50, and then click next, and then upvote you, basically. So your post just gets ignored. So there's a time window to get upvotes, to get attention on larger subs. This sub is so small, though, that even with 0 upvotes, like even if it's negative, it can just be near the top because there's no other new posts. If I scroll down, their front page actually goes down to stuff that's like a week old. Like number 34, week old. Number 30, week old. So they just don't have enough posts, so even if you downvote, it doesn't suppress it. But that's only because it's a 10,000 reader sub. All the popular forums are kind of like that. Social heavy. Like, that's how they got popular, like Twitter and Facebook, too. Twitter's adding a new feature where people who write tweets can hide replies they don't like. Like, they can say, oh, this person responded with a criticism, so I'm going to hide that response. Like, they're sort of put in charge of moderating all the replies to their new tweets. I haven't looked into the details, but I saw a headline about how they were adding that recently. Everyone's a moderator now. I don't think it'll like delete what you said, it'll just hide it. Basically, if I respond to Joe, Joe's going to be able to hide it so Joe's followers don't see what I said, but my followers will still be able to see it. That's what I think is going on. So basically, I can't get any access to Joe's audience or share my criticism with his followers if he doesn't want me to. So from the perspective of his followers, he can hide all criticism. I think that's what they're going for. But I assume that I'll still be able to have my followers see what I said. Oh yeah, I was reading this. That's where I was. Okay, the problem of other minds. Oh, this part. Yeah. This gets into solipsism stuff. They need to read Fabric of Reality and understand how to use criteria for reality and how to like understand complex external things and so on and so forth. The issue is humans do complex behavior, which there's no good explanation of it other than they have a conscious, general, intelligent mind similar to my own. However, animals don't do that. They only do simple behaviors explainable as being like a Roomba. And we know how Roombas are built because we've built them. So we can say we have an understanding of what's going on there, and there's nothing there that looks like emotion, suffering, consciousness, etc. Like we're just doing some math. It doesn't make sense. There's no argument that the math in the Roomba would make it conscious or whatever. And if cows are only doing things similar to that of that nature, then you get the idea. Is consciousness binary? limits of philosophical theory. Okay, so this is typical with academic stuff. They're like, this is a question. Authors have come to opinions, but they're not trying to find the truth. They're just like, Dennett said this, Lycan said that. Oh, Dennett argues consciousness is not binary. They don't even define consciousness when they do this, by the way. They don't even know what they mean by it. Like, consciousness is a vague thing. What we actually know about and understand are things like computational processes. So they should be trying to figure out what they mean by consciousness in terms of something that they actually can speak scientifically and productively about. I mean, if you just think consciousness is like sort of the experience that some people have, then you should find a way to deal with animal rights without bringing that into it. Like, you should be able to argue for animal rights without bringing up qualia. It's the same kind of thing. Like, make a case that uses things we actually know about and have reasonable ideas about, instead of like these very blurry, vague things. So they say animal pain and suffering. They don't even define like pain versus suffering in general, and they sometimes use them interchangeably, and it's a total mess. I use pain for physical pain information signals, and suffering for mental states that the mind dislikes. And they, as far as I've seen, have not even gotten that far of being that clear and knowing what they mean by anything. See, when they study animal pain, they look at physical information processing signals rather than anything to do with, is it actually suffering? They distinguish pain from distress and suffering. Some of them do. Okay, that's good. But how do you know about animal distress? That takes like complicated philosophy. They're so focused on hardware instead of thinking about computation and software. And that the same hardware inputs can be processed very differently by different software. Right, so none of this is actually relevant and doesn't deal with the computer science or the epistemology. They're just getting... So, what commonly happens with me is people have bad ideas which are trumped later. There's logical priority for epistemology. Epistemology is like more important factor in like figuring out the right answer and the thing they're trying to talk about, and their lack of epistemology makes them wrong. Common issue. Here, it's not just epistemology, it's computer science. Their lack of computer science makes them wrong, incompetent, etc. They're not addressing the issues. In addition to their lack of epistemology, which is also crucially relevant here. So it's not just an epistemology thing. I'm used to this issue with epistemology, but I keep trying to talk to people. I've focused in my animal rights discussions on the computer science issues, not the epistemology issues. I've largely avoided talking about critical rationalism, etc., to talk about artificial general intelligence, hardware, software, Turing, etc. And it hasn't gone any better. No one has a clue. The alleged experts don't have a clue and don't address the issues. Like, this whole fucking page on animal consciousness has fucking nothing to say about computer science. You can just do search terms and you'll see. Like, I did search terms earlier, but yeah, compu. 0 hits. They're a bunch of like biologists or something who just don't know computer science and don't realize they need to. So you got just constant ambiguity on issues like, do they think brains are computers or something else? I got some answers to that shit on Reddit. Like, people are like, well, property dualism. Where you just say that consciousness is a physical trait of matter just like mass. Which is just fucking making up magical thinking. Like, you could just as well say that God is a property of matter. How is it better than that? Anyways, so the point of the property dualism thing was to claim that consciousness is non-computational, and that to deny strong AI, to deny that we're ever going to be able to program general intelligence like a human on a silicon computer. Although, like, I wonder, like, if consciousness is a fundamental, like, characteristic of certain atoms, couldn't we just add a few of the right atoms to the silicon computer so it'll have consciousness? Like, which atoms are they and how the fuck does that work? Total nonsense. Yeah, they just don't know anything. I'm done. Okay, summing up. Right, the animal rights people, and not just them, but like the scientific researchers looking at pain receptors or whatever in animals, or looking at crow behaviors or whatever. They don't seem to know computer science. Some of them do, but just don't talk about it. Oh no, but none of them seem to argue with some of the core issues about are minds computational and put together like a whole opinion, like a whole position. Because you can find people who argue about whether minds are computational or not. But then that whole like debate is just separated from the animal rights stuff. They're not doing like a multidisciplinary thing where they actually put together, we have to a coherent position with positions on all the issues, like minds are not computational and this has the such and such consequences for animal rights, and here's what minds are instead, and here's why that's scientific, and so on. And there's just no reasonable positions like that. There's some people who debate some computer sciencey issues, and then separately there's people who like study animal nerves, but the two issues are not really getting combined together. So basically everything the nerve people are saying is irrelevant for lack of computer science. And then a lot of the computer science debates aren't very good. Like, the arguments denying that minds are computational are like really dumb and unreasonable from what I've seen. If anyone knows one that's not, like, let me know. But then if you accept the result that minds are computational, that brains are computers and minds are software running on those computers, and that there's no like special magic property dualism property of certain atoms like carbon or whatever, if you accept strong AI, etc., then people should consider what that means for all this research they're doing. But people don't seem to be making the connection.